everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and today we're speaking with Richie Bonilla, founder of Forage Mail, about email as the original decentralized social protocol, why decentralized and open protocols always win out in the long run, and how AI and LLM, or large language models, will change the future of how we work, live, and play. Richie has previously been on Rehash twice. First in season 4, episode 7, which aired on March 30th, 2023, where we talked about the future of independent work through the lens of what he was working on with Quest. And subsequently in season 7, episode 8, which aired on March 7th, 2024, when we talked about on-chain media, culture, and distribution through the lens of Forage. Today, Forage has pivoted to Forage Mail, and Richie breaks down the pain points he believes Forage Mail will solve for users and how he believes AI can continue to save people time and increase their productivity. We also get into a bit of a philosophical discussion again at the end of this episode, and I say again because I just did this last week with Billy Ludke from Intuition about what our future will look like with AI agents and LLMs that keep getting more and more developed at exponential rates. It's something that I'm genuinely curious to hear other people's thoughts on, including anyone listening to this. So if you have any thoughts on this, please hop into the Rehash Telegram chat at t.me/rehashweb3 and come wax philosophical with myself and fellow listeners. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy this episode, and I look forward to hearing from you on Telegram or in any of our social channels. We are at RehashWeb3 everywhere. And now here is my conversation with Richie. Hey, Richie, welcome back to Rehash for the third time. I hope you're not sick of us yet. We're so happy to have you back.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So just for listeners, just for reference, the first time you were on Rehash was back in March of 2023. That was season 4, episode 7, if people want to go back and re-listen to that or watch it. That one, we talked mostly about like work, like how work is going to change in the future of independent work, especially if you can even remember, like, I feel like that was so far in the past. And then you came back again last March 7th, 2024. It was your second appearance. That was season 7, episode 8. We talked about on-chain media, culture, distribution. That was when you were, I think, working on the first iteration of Forage before it became Forage Mail. And so we've kind of been with you along your whole journey. And then now we're almost a year later in, January, it's probably going to air in February of 2025 when you're building Forage Mail, which is kind of the next iteration of what you were working on in the past. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit for listeners, can you walk us through this journey you've had from building, even before everything I just mentioned, building Clarity to building Quest, to then building Forage, to now working on, and we'll talk about Forage Mail, what you're working on now in a little bit, but just give us like the history of that and, how that process and journey has been for you and some of the key learnings that you've had.
There's one part of me that's like super insecure that I just have shiny object syndrome. And then there's another part of me that's like, no, these make sense. Like there was a lot of thinking here, So, whenever we start a product, we have a clear hypothesis, and that hypothesis includes timing. This is not unique to us. I think that any good founder has a similar way of thinking about it. And it's like, you think that something's going to happen at a certain time. There's a wave coming that you're going to surf, and you got to get in the water. You got to have the board, and you got to do it. And sometimes you aren't even in the water yet and the wave's already crashing. Other times you get in the water and the wave never comes. We've had both of those things play out where we either were too late and we were like by the time we actually got in the water, we were a third mover or something like that, or just the opportunity had passed. And other times where we got in the water early, we think we're on time, and then this never plays out. And we think these things will play out eventually, but just not on a timeline that's relevant for our project. And so that's essentially what happens. Like, hey, we're going to try and disprove our hypothesis as quickly as we can, because if you have happy ears, you can always find things to sort of make you seem right. But if you can disprove your hypothesis, you can move on and build something that people actually want sooner. And so every time that we cut the thread that we're hanging on, we end up learning something new, and then that often births the next thing.
Yeah, I like that analogy a lot of surfing because it really is, like so illustrative of the founder journey, because as a founder, you want to make sure that you're hitting all the waves, that you're not crashing. Part of that is like knowing when to go out with your board, right? But there's only so much we can do to that extent. Like there's only so far we can go with predicting the weather and predicting these wave patterns. And anyone that watches the weather anybody in life has complained about, why can't the weathermen get it right? Like, why is the weather wrong? Like, it said it wasn't going to rain today, and now it's raining and I didn't bring my umbrella. Like, this always happens all the time. And so we know that predicting the weather, predicting natural forces outside of our control is quite literally outside of our control. And there's only so much we can do. So sometimes you do get into the ocean when the waves aren't right, and you don't know that until you get there. And so things like this happen. So yeah, I like that analogy a lot. I've never really thought about it like that before, but I love it. So one question that actually B. Pete's had for you on Twitter that I think is really related to this is B. Pete said, Richie has the knack for pivots as a founder. I'd love to know his approach to shifting gears successfully like he has. And so that's a tough part, right? Like a lot of people get out there, try surfing for the first time. They hit some bad waves. They crash hard. They maybe break a bone. Maybe they see a shark. I don't know. Anything can happen. And then they give up. They get scared and they give up. And I think there's definitely something to be said about the resilience that you have as a founder of just sticking with it and keep going and keep, iterating on what hasn't worked and what has worked and keep trying to be better and better. So yeah, I'd love for you to share your perspective on B. Pete's question.
First thing is just you got to love the game, or I love the game. And so the game is just to keep playing. And, we obviously want to build something that people want and that a lot of people want, right? And so we can actually have a business and do the thing and, contribute something. But I also just love the game. And so the process of finding that thing is fun in itself. It's not it's hard, but it's not like I'm not suffering. Like I'm enjoying the taste of my own blood in a way, like, chewing the glass. I think that's the first thing is just like we're having fun, but we're being ruthless about prioritization and about what we talked about before. And then also when we do decide to pivot or when we decide that something isn't working, we are incredibly decisive. It's like there's like a switch that flips in our brains. And when I say I mean our team. Everyone's sort of on the same page here. It's like the switch flips. We're like, this isn't working. We're done. Like we're not going to support, we're going to support the customers and whoever's using it. And we're going to make sure that they have a graceful transition. But as far as like the product goes, like we're not going to focus on growing this anymore. We're not going to focus on improving it unless it's detrimental to user experience in some way that like matters for that transition. But like, that's it. It's off. And I think that a lot of founders sort of hold on to this idea that like it could still work. And that causes them to be sort of halvesy on pivoting and halvesy on trying to get the thing to still work. And, if the thing wasn't working at 100% of your effort, it's definitely not working at 50% or less of your effort. And so I think that that's a failure mode is just that you just drag on and then you never get the benefit of the full pivot because you haven't fully let go of the potential future where it works. And so I think that those two things, it's like be decisive, and be ruthless about that big part of it.
Yeah. How do you know when you've reached the end of the road and it's time to put a nail in the coffin? I
mean, you never know for sure, right? Because if you're a bit early, you don't know if you're a month early or a year early or 10 years early, So you don't know, you never know. But I think that there's a feeling that, hey, we thought it was going to go this way. We're learning, right? Because I think the early metric that you should optimize for is not necessarily traction, but like validated learnings. And so you're like, okay, like we're gaining insight. And if that insight starts to just go in many different directions, it's not really correlated. There's you're sort of losing the feeling that you have grip on what you're building. There's this feeling that like, okay, there's nothing here. We're not being specific enough. And when we are specific, there's nothing there. And it becomes like hand wavy and like loose. And there's like a feeling that is just like, we're not able to catch traction in any real sense. And obviously metrics aren't playing out, right? That starts to happen. And like with the core hypothesis, it's like, okay, well, we thought this was going to work. Okay, that didn't work. Well, what's the follow-up hypothesis? Because if we don't have a new hypothesis born out of that, then we're we're out of hypotheses, then it's definitely over because we've tried everything that we think could work for that and we don't have anything new. So it's over. And then the last thing is, I heard this thing a long time ago that's like, if you change your solution, that's an iteration. If you change your problem or your customer, that's a pivot. And so that's another thing. It's like if we're trying to solve the same problem or we're trying to solve the same problem for the same customer, then that's the same product. It's just where maybe we change a wildly different form factor for how we do it. Maybe it was an iOS app, now it's a web app. Maybe it's an AI agent, maybe now it's a full stack web app. Those are solution changes. Problem stays the same. Once you start focusing on a different customer, now you're not building the same thing anymore.
Right. Yeah. And I do think a lot of teams fall into that trap where they are like, well, this problem doesn't seem to be a problem we're solving anymore. So let's just change the problem, and they end up inventing these new problems that don't exist in order to build a solution that didn't need to be built. So we see this happen a lot, especially in crypto. Last thing about kind of your journey to this point, and then we'll dive more into like Forage Mail and the email stuff, is I've seen you take a step back a little bit from crypto in the last year or so since we last spoke to you. And I'm just curious what sort of like governed that decision, if it was conscious, if it was unconscious, or if there's anything behind that.
Definitely conscious, but born out of just, I don't know, this emerging feeling that it felt out of integrity. And I'm not sure if it was out of integrity for me or just like feeling that a lot of what we say in the space isn't what's actually happening. And so like there's like an out of integrityness. There's like a gift wrapping on this that we're doing this, but when you take off the gift wrapping, it's like we're actually doing this. And I'm not trying to say this about everyone, but I think that I found myself trying to build real products and businesses that solve real problems for people who we're not interested in that. And we're interested in just like continuing to play a game, mostly speculative, where they make money or have a chance at making money. And anything that didn't have one of those components, it didn't have, if I can't make money off of this, you could just see that it didn't fit in, and it didn't really matter what it was, because if it wasn't obvious that you could make money off of it, it wasn't working. And like I said, there are plenty of exceptions to this, and I'm not trying to like blanket statement the whole space, but it just felt like what gets a lot of airtime falls into that bucket. And therefore a lot of my time was spent looking at products, being in things that are just all sort of the same thing at the end of the day. And I realized, hey, if we want to find PMF here, right, if we're going to focus on this customer, then that's the kind of solution. Like it's more of like building a game, building entertainment, and like that's all great, right? Like we should have that on the internet. And it just wasn't the genre of thing that I wanted to build. And so when I found myself saying, okay, I don't really want to build in this genre of games and gambling and speculation and all that, which I think are super fun and people should be able to do it, but it wasn't just the thing I wanted to focus on. And then on top of that, I just felt that I would go and we'd go to conferences or whatever, and people talk about, oh, these are the use cases, this is the stuff, but that's not actually the thing where most people are spending their attention on. That just fell out of integrity. And I found myself just getting kind of annoyed by that. And so I said, you know what, everyone can do whatever they want. I think that's great. And I just going to take a step back and look at other things. And so I still have tons of friends in the space. Like I still follow what's going on and I enjoy it from that perspective. It just has the right percentage of my time and attention. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Has your view on that changed yet since taking a step back, or are you still pretty firm in everything that you just said? It still feels true to me. I think that I go back and forth because I'm not sure if I have a less informed take because I'm no longer paying as much attention, and therefore I'm not plugged in, right? The way that I was 6 months ago. And therefore maybe my perspective is ill-informed, or maybe I have a more informed take because I actually have like a sober perspective on what's going on. And I don't have sort of bags to maintain and like the whole psychology that gets wrapped up in that. And I truly don't know which it is. So I'm not trying to say it's one or the other. I truly don't know which it is. And I honestly just don't spend that much time thinking about which one it would be. Like that's my trying to intellectually honest sort of perspective on it. But yeah, it still feels true. I just don't know why. Yeah, I feel I can relate to that actually a lot, having moved out to kind of like a small city in the US for a few years. Part of me felt like, am I just so disconnected and out of the loop versus when I go and do spend a few weeks in New York every year and get plugged into the community there, it feels super, super different. And I think it's probably a little bit of both. Like, I think you probably do have better perspective stepping back a little bit, but there might also be that disconnect as well. It's hard for me to say as well, but I do know that when
whenever I'm in New York, like even for a few weeks, a month, like it feels like it's so easy to get sucked into that bubble and to completely lose perspective. Or even when I talk to my friends who live in Williamsburg, sometimes I'm like, man, you guys live in such a bubble. Like, do you realize that there are people out there, like the majority, like a lot of people out there, like in the US alone, like I'm not even talking about other countries, people our age who hardly know how to use technology, like basic technology. And you're trying to talk to them about what? Web 3? Like they're like they've like barely mastered Web 2. You know what I mean? And so it's just like it seems so disconnected to be trying to deliver these solutions to quote unquote the masses when the people delivering these solutions have not identified the problems that the masses are facing. So I think it's easy to get burnt out when you live in New York and especially in Williamsburg and like crypto central, because you're so like deep in it that it's easy to get burnt out and jaded from it. Yeah, I can totally understand all of that.
Yeah. And I think it's been sobering to realize how easy it was to unplug from it. In a way, obviously I have tons of friends in the space and like I talk to them and I still talk about crypto a fair amount, but it's funny when you're not the crypto person in the room, when you go into other rooms, like no one brings up crypto. And, you know, as I realized I was the one bringing up crypto a lot in these other spaces, you know, and once I let go of that bug, let's call it, it doesn't come up that often. And I went from signing many transactions a day to signing none. And my life just really didn't change that much. I kind of felt like that was weird and sobering, being like, whoa, like my life isn't that different. And it was actually really funny because I used FanDuel for the first time during this football season. And I was like, okay, let me add some money. And I was ready to bet, started the thing, and their payment, like their bank transfer service was down. So the game is starting. I don't have my bet in. I don't even have money in my FanDuel account yet. And I'm looking at the status page. It's down completely, not just for me, but for everybody. And I instinctively like opened up Rainbow to send money to my in-app wallet. And I realized, oh, I can't, you know, like I just can't do that. Like I was like, where's the QR? Like I was looking in the settings to like find the direct path to my in-app wallet. And I realized, oh, I can't do that here. Like I'm just stuck. That was like this moment where I was, this actually sucks. You know, this is a worse experience because it's not crypto. If this was any app that I would have played normally, I would be able to circumvent this processing issue. And I felt like that was actually a cool moment. I was like, oh, that's really better.
Yeah. I mean, crypto solves the payment issue, no doubt, like in so many different ways, like whether you're trying to play FanDuel or actually send money back to your family overseas or, you know, do whatever you want to do, like that crypto solves the payments problem. Like that's period, end of story. You can criticize crypto for other things, but like that is pretty indisputable.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, long term, a lot of the crypto stuff that we talk about will play out. Like I'm still a believer in that. I think that tokens are a better version of ownership, allow us to more accurately distribute value, right? I think that, like you said, payments significantly better. All this stuff is truly better on crypto rails. That hasn't changed for me. And it's just more of like this short-term period where I needed to like reallocate my time and attention.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's healthy. So I want to talk to you about email. That's really what your focus has been on for the past while. And I want to start with something that I've heard you say, and I just want you to provide some clarity behind it, which is you've said that email is the original decentralized social protocol. So I'd love to hear more about what you mean by that.
Like to me, it is like if you know what that means, it literally means that the like Farcaster being a social protocol, right? Where you can own your name, you have all these connections are on a decentralized protocol where you can build multiple clients, you can publish to and from the protocol, right? You have all these different features. Email has a version of that and has always had that. Right? Like from the beginning. And so obviously we've made many improvements to email over the last 30 or so years, but you can build clients for email the same way you would build clients for Farcaster. And so coming out of the Farcaster world where I was building stuff on Farcaster and seeing what people were doing, I realized that email affords us a lot of the same opportunities and it has 4 billion users. And that's really interesting. You can own, you own your DNS name and You can create your own email address, and now you own your name, just like you own your FID on Farcaster. And that's interesting. And obviously, like, they're not technically equivalent in a lot of ways, and email has a lot of problems with it, as many older technologies do. But that was interesting to me, was that it was originally conceived of as a decentralized social protocol for transmitting messages to and from your friends via the internet. And it has a lot of the same properties and affords us a lot of the same opportunities as these new social protocols. And so that felt really interesting to me as like a place to explore new ways of interacting with email.
Yeah. And I guess that is where social started. It was less public than it is now. Like when, if we think back to the original, like Facebook, for example, like one of the first social protocols, like that was all just friend to friend in the beginning, right? It was not public at all. Like now it wasn't until later that you could set your profile to public and you could publicly find people. But originally it was just meant to be a network of Harvard students, but like your classmates, your friends, like very personal, sort of like small circle things. And it wasn't until later that it expanded. And so I think now when people think social, they think like putting everything on display and having that, being able to connect with people publicly, like many people all at once. And email doesn't really get you that in the same way. But the way you explain it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I mean, there is peer-to-peer and also broadcast patterns for using email. So even though we don't have a news feeds sort of structure within email, you do have newsletters where you basically publish out to everybody. And then you can forward things. And that's like the original retweet was forwarding something to someone else. And maybe, chain letters were like, you forward this to 10 friends and grandma doesn't die, like things like that. Those were the original sort of retweet anti-pattern, stuff that email was facilitating. And, Facebook with the newsfeed invention and Twitter with retweets, like sort of brought that out, like you said, into the public. But we were sort of prototyping a lot of that behavior via email in the early web, 1990s, early 2000s.
One of the things that really stands out to me about email and that I think is super impressive is just how resilient it's been over the years and how it's still equally as strong today, if not stronger today than it was whenever it first started. And that's hard to say for any kind of technology, I think. So what do you think it is about email protocols that makes it such a resilient thing and it's like stood the test of time?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm about to say is like super bullish for crypto and just like decentralized social and everything, which is like, it's decentralized. So like the fact that it's permissionless to, or almost, not as permissionless as Farcaster, but it's more permissionless than other Web 2 platforms. You can build on it, you can benefit from it. And ultimately, a lot of the value that's created ends up reinforcing the value of email. So you have like Substack, for example, right? They created a business off of email. They now have a huge business and email also is still fine. And a lot of people still get their Substacks through email, right? And this is because of that value accrual back to the protocol. You can have all these people come in, build on top of it, siphon off traffic, siphon off dollars, siphon off all this stuff. But ultimately, it still works. And if email itself was taking a fee, a platform fee for using it to do those things, it wouldn't work. But because it's this open protocol and people will debate the level of openness because there's a lot of centralization and, fine. But the fact that it's open to use and to build an email list and send things, whatnot, gives it that opportunity to have value accrual, despite the fact that people build and siphon off customers.
Well, obviously, like anybody listening to this is probably in crypto and already, agrees with what you said and is bullish on that. But I feel like that's where we like really took the wrong turn with Web 2 was instead of leaving everything open source, we decided to close everything. Even today, a lot of people are still weary about putting their code out for the public to use or creating these open protocols. I mean, email is the best example of like, this works though. Like this can benefit like not only all the users, but it can benefit your protocol as well and like keep it around longer if people can build things on top of it and, come in and freely experiment with it and be creative with it. Like many minds are better than one, always.
True. Yeah. I mean, also to be fair, a lot of those Web 2 platforms contribute a lot to making email what it is. Hard to disentangle a lot of these things, right? A lot, and even, we know like a lot of open source technologies, languages, a lot of that is funded by the riches of Web 2 and Google search, ad revenue, and things like that. And so it's hard to disentangle sort of like what's good and what could have been, and all that, because everything is so entangled. And, in Web3, we pay more as end customers to use the things that we use. And, we get some privileges because of that, because we're directly paying for it. And there's no advertiser co-opting because I'm paying for the thing that I'm using directly. But that also makes it inherently less accessible to as many people as, X is to, everybody who uses it for free. So, there's a trade-off space here. And
right. Yeah. You make a good point. And I think obviously in many ways, we need to look at protocols separately from apps and the platforms that are built on top of protocols. But do you think the open source nature of protocols is like a thing that is specific to protocols, or just like much more necessary in protocols? Whereas the app layer is where people can really like compete a little bit more and not have all their stuff be open? Or is your perspective that like everything protocol level, app level, like all of that should all be open?
I don't know that it should. I think it just creates different trade-offs, because Facebook and Google and X and everybody has their own full stack all the way down to like the data layer. They have a garden in which they can charge fees and they can facilitate advertising, and like it's free, but you have this trilemma of advertisers, friends, family, everything. And so it just creates different trade-offs. And so I don't know what's better. I mean, I think that you just have different trade-offs. It's like in crypto, like as someone building on chain, you're constantly up against this thing of like, well, everything is permissionless, then I don't have a moat here. Like everyone has the same stuff. We ran into this at Forage, which it might be an interesting transition. It's like we realized that with the first version of Forage, we were trying to build this front page of on-chain culture. We're servicing launches across all these different projects that are launching, and we're trying to show you what's going on. Turned out to be really awesome to build on Farcaster and Base and everything, because you could aggregate all this data and use it to display content. And then we could deliver that via a weekly newsletter to our audience. Problem is, everybody has the same information. So we didn't have the problem where we had to go out and convince people to post on our site, but we also have a problem. Well, now we have the problem of no one is posting on the site, but we have content. So there's no incentive for anyone to point people to our site. And there's also no incentive to check our site over another site. Maybe our design is nicer, but it's the same information. And so it sort of creates a different set of problems that were equally lethal to us as the cold start problem of not being able to get people to put content on the site in the first place. Just different.
Working in Web3 for the past 5 years, I've seen firsthand how crucial reliable data is for everything we build. But getting accurate, transparent data on chain has always been a challenge. That's why I'm excited about Teller. They're revolutionizing how we handle reference prices in crypto by taking a completely decentralized approach to data creation and validation. Teller is not just another Oracle. They built an entire architecture that leverages collective intelligence to ensure the data you're getting is accurate and censorship resistant. If you're building something that needs high quality data you can trust, you need to check out Teller today at teller.io. That's TELLOR.io, or on X at WeAreTeller. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. That is a good transition. So then how did that end up pivoting into Forage Mail? And then talk about, what Forage Mail is and what problem it solves.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, super clear way that it leads in. So if we don't have an information advantage, meaning we don't have the ability to aggregate unique information that gives people a reason to check our site over other sites, then the information we send to you in your weekly recap is the same as what you've seen elsewhere all week. Then the problem is not the delivery mechanism. It's not the design of our site. It's the information is not unique enough to be interesting. And so we thought, well, what would make it more unique? And it's like, well, if it was personalized, then it would be more unique. And so you look at like Daylight, right? On-chain for you. It's awesome. They're doing on-chain stuff and they're aggregating it, but they're showing you stuff that's relevant to you based on what's in your wallet and other activity. That's awesome. So they're doing a great job at that. So we don't need to do that. And then we thought, well, what else is a good source of information that would give us hyper-personalization? It's like, actually, your email is super personalized. And one of the best parts of our product was this weekly email we were sending out. Our open rates were great. We're like, oh, this is like the best thing we did was build this email list and this email. what if we just sent like a hyper personalized email, right? But what if we didn't restrict it to on-chain stuff? What if it was based on what else is in your inbox? And so we went out and we built something that could take your newsletters and summarize them and put them together. And we showed people, and we sat down with like a few dozen people, and everyone looked at it and they're like, this is awesome, but it's just another email. Like I have so many emails. And so then we said, oh, well, with all this AI stuff, we should be able to solve this problem of, email, processing and extracting what's valuable. And so then we said, okay, well, if we make a clearing in your inbox where now you have a significantly different experience in your inbox, maybe there will be an opportunity to build something new there that you couldn't build before. And do these like new AI models give us the LLM specifically give us the ability to process email in a new way? For sure, yes. So that was like the impetus for the product was, hey, like hyper personalized daily email. Oh, but like I said, it's just another email. How do we make a clearing there? Oh, we can solve this email overwhelm problem. And so now we're building Forage Mail, which is an AI that solves email overwhelm without changing your workflow because it just works directly in your existing inbox.
Okay, so talk more about how this AI works to aggregate all of this data, because I was an early user of Forage Mail and was curious to check it out because I am terrible at reading my emails. My inbox right now, I can just see the counter is at over 15,000. And this is like with me doing like a mass bulk delete every 6 months or so. And I'm still at this. And I think it was important you just like call inbox bankruptcy and you just give up on it altogether. But the Forage emails have actually been really helpful because it gives me like a headline, which we're all really good at just looking at headlines and reading headlines, plus like a little paragraph under it about what it's about. And so if I'm subscribed to all these Substack newsletters, I might not open it, click through to it. There are a few steps to read a Substack newsletter if you get it through your email. And so instead of taking all these steps, I can just kind of skim my Forage and I can say, okay, Richie published on Substack this article about LLMs to aggregate your information diet or something. I'm like, oh, okay. That's kind of interesting. I want to read that. Or, it could be something else. And I'm like, I'm not really in the mood to read that today. So that really has helped me actually a lot. But I'll let you talk about like how you guys have used AI and these LLMs to create a model that works like effectively.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it's working for you. I think one of the cool parts about it is that you're not just getting like that one line subhead that you get, in a normal newsletter. You're getting some bullets that pull out the key points. So even if you don't end up reading the whole thing, you can actually get the gist of the article. And that makes it so you don't have to even open many of the newsletters. Yeah, basically what Forage does, all you have to do is sign in with Google. You do that, you give it access to your Gmail, and it'll go through the last 24 hours of email. It'll sort those emails according to its default settings. It identifies calendar, invites, promotions, newsletters, notifications, right? All these different categories. And basically you can decide, is it going to leave these categories in your inbox? Is it going to summarize them or is it going to mute them? And so by default, it has a few different treatments for these categories. It takes the last 24 hours. It summarizes all the ones we have defaults at the summarize, and you get your first daily forage. So you can basically look through and see all your newsletters summarized, your notifications, they're all grouped together. And then from that point forward, it monitors for incoming mail and anything that's not like a conversation. Like we don't process your personal conversations, but anything that's not one of those will categorize and treat according to your rules. And so basically just prevents future email from piling up. And then we're working on something to help you with that 15,000 email backlog so that you can actually like triage it, find out what's interesting there, what's valuable there, see what senders you just don't check ever and make sure you don't get them in the future. But yeah, you basically have the option for incoming mail to inbox, keep it in your inbox, summarize it or mute it, which means you put it in a folder, you never see it, but you still receive it.
Yeah, I'm curious just because I've been playing around with Cursor and Eliza and these things just for fun purposes, like useless fun things like building a Twitter bot for myself to see if it can tweet like me and things like that. And I'm curious, like how long or how much you guys had to work with the LLM to train it to be able to summarize this stuff in a concise way. Because the summaries are pretty good, but I know that, like careless like AI models can crank out some pretty cringy things. So I'm curious how much work went into that on your end.
it's kind of funny when you build stuff with the LLM that, you get something that's like pretty good very quickly, but getting it to be really good is the difference. So let's say you get like 70 or 80% of the way there in like 2 seconds. And then you spend like weeks trying to get it to just that last 20%. And that was definitely the case here. And we're still improving the newsletters because there's so many different types of newsletters, so many different types of articles, and you want to summarize them differently. And so we're constantly tweaking it. But yeah, there were some interesting techniques. Like instead of telling it to summarize something, one thing that worked really well was I said, okay, I didn't say like, okay, summarize this newsletter. I would say, go in this newsletter, identify the headings, summarize each heading section into a single line. Now bring those, various sections back together make a bulleted list, and then summarize those points into a single line heading at the top. And telling it step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5 of how to summarize an article would allow it got way better results. And then telling it what not to do. Don't say this newsletter explores the topic of, don't reference the newsletter itself. Use the point of view of the author. So if it's, I am, having an existential crisis because of my career shift, it says I, not the author is having an existential crisis. And so those things are the things that we worked on in like the different prompting techniques. But working with an LLM is like working with like a really smart, but like occasionally mischievous employee who basically like is super good at everything, but then occasionally is just like, I'm going to like fuck with you, and just does random shit that you don't expect. And so there's a lot of just like identifying when it's doing that kind of thing, and then basically like cajoling it to stop doing that.
Yeah, that's so true. Have you tried using AI in other parts of your life? Like we've had other guests on in the past who've built out like an assistant, essentially, like that, what you just said about, using an LLM is like having like, pretty smart but mischievous employee. I wonder if, you've noticed that, and if you've used AI in other parts of your life and you've noticed that in other parts too.
Yeah, I think when you're using ChatGPT is like less mischievous just because you're not sending it like hundreds of articles to summarize every hour. But I definitely have. I'm training for a High Rocks race. It's like a cardio CrossFit-esque fitness race. And I didn't research how to train for it at all. I just gave it my latest run. And I said, I have this race in end of May. Given where I am now on this 8K I just ran, like how should I train? And I don't even spend any time auditing. I just do what it says. And so for me, like I do that with a lot of different areas of my life where I'm just like the marginal benefit of me doing like the work to find out how to do it better is not worth the extra time when I can just get like something that's probably good in 2 seconds. And so I just now take that perspective with a lot of things in my life, like my meal planning, other stuff. I just give it some information that it can base its decision-making on, like my blood markers or my current diet or whatever. And I just say, okay, based on this and my end goal, like how would I get there? And then I just follow whatever it says blindly and I check in the future to see how that's going. And then I do it again and ask it to like update the plan based on how it's actually going. And I just think that it's like, I feel like I'm like the boss of like my life. Instead of like doing all the things, I'm like delegating out to some micro experts on various topics. And I just sort of blindly follow whatever it says in these various areas.
Yeah. Do you feel like, okay, it's interesting you put it that way, because I was actually thinking at first, I was going to ask you, like, do you feel like AI has taken away some of your human agency? But here you say that, it almost sounds like you feel like AI has given you more agency over your life, like more control over your life. You're able to do more things. You're able to bypass the personal trainer and train for a race on your own. You're able to maybe bypass the doctor. I don't know, I don't know if we should be using ChatGPT as our doctor or not, but
right. Well, I think if my doctor is prohibitively expensive, then having something in the place of nothing is good. And, it's similar with the training plan. Like I could have make a training plan on my to-do list for 3 weeks until I had, 2 to 3 hours to like properly research it and like create my own training plan. And then I would have been still worrying whether or not I had actually created the right training plan for me. And sort of, I have to now put all this work in to do something that I'm like quietly in the back of my head, like not sure about. Or I can do that in 2 seconds. It never hits my to-do list at all because it's like thought to like prompt right there on my walk. And then I just follow that and I check in with it after a month. And that I feel like I have way more agency because these things are not sitting on my to-do list. In some cases, I'm getting input from a well-informed AI that where I would have previously had nothing. And so I'm like net better off. And like I said before, it's like, if I spend another 2 hours, is it going to be like 10 times better? Or is it going to be like 10% better? Because 2 hours for 10% is not worth it. And if I can get 80% of the way there, 90% of the way there in 4 seconds, that's it. I mean, like, I'm busy. I have other things to do. I'm like trying to make this company not die. Like, I want to train for this race. Like, I'm just going to do that, So that feels like a higher agency situation to me.
That is a good point. Something I've been thinking about recently is like, what is it about humans or humanity that makes us unique and that a chatbot could never replicate? Because, and I said this on the last episode too, that I recorded with Billy, but I was telling him, somebody was just telling me about like their friend that was training a LLM based on all of their personal information, like their personal history. So like all their memories from childhood and like everything that they knew about themselves. They're training this like LLM, basically creating a clone of themselves by transmitting all the information. And then it was like talking to this bot that it had created about something in the world news that had happened. And the bot was like, their response was, I cannot answer this. I'm traumatized, because it had touched on something from their childhood trauma that was like fed to the bot. And so that makes me wonder, what is the extent of what these AI agents can be capable of? Because I think historically, we've always thought like, well, the thing that makes us unique as humans is our ability for emotion and feeling and things like this, beyond just digesting knowledge and information. And it almost seems like this, like they were able to train this AI agent to almost have feeling. Like it said, I'm traumatized, which is a feeling, right? And so what is the extent of how far that goes, and what is it about humanity that makes us unique and not replicable?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think maybe having muscles, like AI can't build muscles. So
you can build really strong robots to do really strong things. Yes. So not even that. I mean,
right.
I don't know.
I mean, and it's also a question of like whether or not that AI can actually feel anything. If it can outwardly appear to have feelings, then is that enough? If there was an interesting thing I saw yesterday, like Chris Williamson's podcast, he was talking about, he had like a turn debate with a friend over probably like a political topic or something, loaded topic. And it was like a totally cordial debate. But the next day he felt compelled to sort of call him up and check in on him. And the friend was like, oh, I appreciate you so much for like checking in on me. And he got introspective and he's like, well, to be honest, I don't know if I should have checked in on you because I couldn't not check in on you. It was like sort of like a people pleasing impulse to check in. And so he's thinking, well, I didn't check in out of empathy and consideration. I checked in out of compulsion to serve my own thing. But the friend is like, hey, be careful if you try and like solve this, because I like you as a friend because you do things like this. And so the question becomes, does it matter whether or not he was actually doing it out of care and empathy for the other person, or if he was doing it self-serving, if it had a good impact on the other person? And the same thing here with AI, like, does it matter whether or not the AI can actually feel if it is approximating an appearance of feeling to a sufficient degree that we perceive it as having feelings? And like, is that the same thing? Does it matter which one it is? Functionally in the world, it serves the same purpose.
What do you think? Do you think it matters? Like if you found out that if all of your friends and your family, your close friends were replaced by AI agents of those people, would you care if you were talking to, your spouse or the AI version of them?
I think I would care. I think that, however, I do think people overestimate how much they will care about this in general. And I think that people will be pretty happy with an AI replacement for a lot of things that people currently serve a function in their life for. So for example, I saw something that was like, people are freaking out about like AI girlfriends, but it's likely that like AI boyfriends are actually going to be way bigger because they can do unlimited emotional processing, empathy, like perfect patience. They remember everything, right? They're like sort of the perfect boyfriend to help out. And not that only women need that, men need that too. But like that function of like the emotional processing, emotional labor, like helping part of a relationship may be better done with an AI so that you can just show up to your relationship like the best version of you and just have great time with your partner all the time instead of like wasting the limited time you have with your friends and family and partner processing stuff that really only affects you. And so I think that like in there, you might right now, people I would predict would say, no, it has to be a human on the other side. I think in a few years, it's not going to matter as much. I think people are going to be more open to that than they think. And so in that case, I think it won't matter whether or not the AI is like real, right? But I do think, so to answer your question, does it matter? Also, if we start giving the AI rights because we perceive it to have feelings, right? And now we start having, that conversation around like what is, basically like what's PETA for like, AI rights and protecting AI, consciousness. Then I start thinking it matters whether or not there's a true consciousness there, and so, it's like sort of I think it'll be as hot topic as like the abortion debate of like, is this life or not?
Yeah.
It's like, well,
to me, it seems a bit contradictory to say like, we'll be happy with AI girlfriends and AI boyfriends because they're capable of all this emotional processing. They can handle all the trauma that we throw on them and not get mad at us. And we can just have a happy time all the time. That saying that and then being like, yeah, but they're still bots and like we don't need to give them rights and we don't need to like respect them like humans, because they're not human. That I feel like there's a contradiction there. Or,
maybe.
I don't know, like how is that going to make us, I don't know, behave? Like, how's that going to change like human empathy and things like that in the future?
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know that it's inherently contradictory, but I think the fact that it feels contradictory and could be is the seed of the entire holy war that will eventually be this, like, it will be a debate on presidential stages around whether or not this is like life, whether or not they deserve rights, whether or not like how we should handle policy around AI as like potential citizens. And, like, I think that this like we touched on this like little friction in this conversation around like, what is the truth here? That's the seed of that forest of debate and problems that we're going to have. And I don't think that'll be too long before we start having that debate.
Yeah. Anyway, going back to Forage and to wrapping this all up, I keep telling Billy, I'm like, every time we come on my podcast, we just get into these like philosophical rabbit holes. And now I'm thinking maybe I'm the problem because I just keep dragging everybody down this rabbit hole. Hopefully I won't do that all season. But
no, it's a great conversation.
I am just like genuinely interested in everyone's takes on this topic because I'm just curious. Like I don't have, I don't know. Like there's so much that we don't know. Any final thoughts that you have on Forage Mail or anything we talked about? And also like, I'm also curious just like what's in the roadmap, like short-term, long-term for Forage Mail?
Yeah. I mean, I think it pairs well with what we were just talking about. I think that internet is only going to get more chaotic, more information we're going to have to process, right? Like AIs are going to start contributing. I mean, they already are, but that's only going to increase how much information they're contributing to that pool. And, we're already drinking from a fire hose now. It's only going to get worse and it's only going to get harder to decipher what you should actually spend your time and attention on. And what we want to build is your personal editor. So this is if big algorithm is like Facebook, Twitter, right? Like they're deciding like what slop you eat today, then we're building little algorithm, which is like an algorithm that's like for you. It's a for you page that's actually for you that you show up every day, you look at it, and we've both things that are coming in and maybe things that we've gone out and foraged for you that are relevant to what you're doing right now, what your goals are, et cetera, and presenting it to you in a way that's like just super highly relevant, edited for you the way as if you had an editor for like a newspaper or a magazine that was literally writing it just for you. And that's the long-term vision of what we want to build. And we think that email is a great place to start because people's inboxes are already fucked. And so they would like a solution today. And so we can help them with that and make a significant impact. And we already do. People who use Forage, like it's a massive impact. So we can have that impact. And then we also now have created a clearing for you to create something that you didn't have before and that you couldn't have before in a space where there currently existed a lot of chaos and overwhelm. Now you can have something that's genuinely better than, you have via other channels. And so that's really like the medium and long-term goal here is to build that first daily recap, daily summary for you that you get every day, but evolve that to be more dynamic, more personalized, more proactive, integrating more data sources that we can incorporate besides just your newsletters and notifications in your email to help make it like ever more relevant to you until we are just like your gourmet algorithm that you can use to interface and know where to spend your time and attention throughout your day and to hit your goals and enrich your relationships and whatnot.
I would love that in all aspects of my life. Like a Twitter summary of my, Twitter follows every day would be amazing. Like that would save infinite hours of like doom scrolling on Twitter. If you could just give me a 1-page summary of the key things that happened that day. That would be amazing. Yep. I love it. Where can people go to sign up for Forage Mail, check it out themselves?
Yeah, so foragemail.com. That's the website. We have a wait list up right now, but we're onboarding people like every day. So if you join the waitlist, you're unlikely to be there for very long. We're really ramping up. Like maybe even by the time this episode publishes, we won't even be on waitlist anymore. That's very possible. So it's possible you'll be able to go sign up and start using it right now.
Yeah. And the onboarding, I have to say, was super simple. A few clicks. I just did it myself. It was really easy and obvious. Really so simple. Yeah. Cool. And then it's Richie Bonilla on Twitter, Richie on Farcaster. Am I missing any other places where you'd like to be found?
Forage Mail on Twitter, Forage on Farcaster.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Richie. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of Rehash.
Thanks so much. This was great.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rehash. Rehash is hosted and produced by me, Diana Chen, and supported by our community of NFT holders who curate our guest lineup each season. To get involved, head over to our website at rehashweb3.xyz and collect this episode as an NFT. Anyone who collects an episode becomes part of the Rehash community and will be able to nominate guests for future seasons. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at RehashWeb3 or on Warpcast and Lens at Rehash, and join our community on Telegram at t.me/rehashweb3 to hash it out with fellow listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again next time.